Welcome to Step Into the Pivot. We're your hosts. I'm Theresa Conti.
And I'm Ivana Polonio. We talk with people just like you. We have honest conversations about current issues that women and men face and how we pivot to address them in our lives.
This podcast is your companion as you step into a workout or take some time for yourself.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Step Into the Pivot, which is actually kicking off a very special series. We are in the month of October, Pink October. So we've decided that we're going to dedicate this month and our episodes to breast cancer awareness. And we will travel with our guests through interesting stories and ideas and concepts and experiences, exploring awareness, advocacy, fear, courage, and supporting one another. And how can we really be there, be better support systems, be more attuned, be more loving, be more kind in the face of this, really serious, situation, really serious. Well, what would you call it, Teresa? What do you when you think about breast cancer as a topic? Is there one word that comes up for you as a keyword? Is it what do you call it? Is it I don't want to give the word.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I don't know really what the word is either. It's that awareness, honestly, that it's out there, and that 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer at some point in their lives. I mean, and that statistic back in the 50s and 60s was 1 in 14 women. So you can see how there has been that shift, that more of us are experiencing it. So, it's just us being aware of what that can look like.
Yeah. Yeah, the labels are so hard, right? And
Yeah.
and one of the things I've learned from you as you've been helping me increase my awareness of what it means to be, facing breast cancer, fighting breast cancer, living with breast cancer, surviving breast cancer, succumbing to breast cancer is that, the experiences are both so unique and so universal.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're doing here is taking the risk to talk about it
Yeah.
and just bring it up. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a big change also. I don't know if we can assign a number to that, but we are talking about it more as a society, as
Absolutely.
women in business.
Absolutely. I think we have to. You know, I I did a brief series of blogs where I talked about Ruth Handler, who is the creator of Barbie. And I know that sounds crazy, but she was a very wonderful businesswoman, really. And when she had breast cancer back in the 60s, you could not talk about it. Right. So I just think the fact that we can talk about it now, we can support each other, also takes away some of that stigma, right? That it's okay. It happens. And even though I say, now it's 1 in 8 women instead of 1 in 14 women that get it, but more and more women are surviving, right? There's more treatments. We know more about it. We know what's happening with it. We know, that doctors, are working to develop other methods where, you go get your annual blood test for all your, cholesterol and all that, and they may be able to at some point test to see if you have cancer in your body, right? There's some things they can see today, but they can't see everything. And I think that is going to make it even better and allow us to be able to really understand that and know that, right? So I think we've come a long way and there's still more to come. But I think the good news is more and more women too are surviving, right? When I had my breast cancer, they pretty much told me that if I had had it 10 years before, I would have had to undergo chemo and radiation. But now they knew that my type, it was like, do you need it or do you don't? And some of that's your decision now, Teresa, and da 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 da. So, I think that's so awesome in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Thanks for starting to share about your own experience. So today we don't have an additional guest because you are in that, guest seat. You
Mhm.
kicked off our whole podcast show with personal shares,
Yeah.
and we talked about how there were times when you and I knew each other and we had beautiful and deep conversations, but I was not aware of what was really going on for you
Mhm.
because you weren't sharing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you had really good reasons why you weren't sharing. I also, then got to a point where I did become aware, and then that, helped us deepen our connection. And now you're sitting in this seat of also being able to educate other women
Mhm.
about breast cancer
Yeah.
and continue to provide that, support because you've lived it. So,
Yeah.
anything else you wanna educate us about? Anything else that is interesting and important and useful or maybe sobering for, our listeners
Yeah.
to keep in mind this month?
Yeah, I think I'd like to keep it more along the awareness, right? That, I still do a lot of reading about it and, looking at some of the statistics and things because just because, I've been over 9 years cancer free doesn't mean it can't come back. So it's something you still have to continue to be aware of, right? So for all of us, I think it's important. And I also think it's always interesting to me. I read some of the things, right, where how they say there's not one single cause of breast cancer. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of our lifestyle. It's a combination of, our eating habits. It's a combination of our genetics, right? So some of it we don't have control over, but there is testing, right? If you have parents or, moms or, who've had it, that they, you can go have some of the BRCA testing and some of those other things to determine it. Mayo Clinic, I know, is working on a generation study, right? So that they can look down through the generations and try to figure out, how likely someone is to get this. And I think that that's some of the cool things that will help this whole breast cancer awareness ultimately. Knowing this, knowing who may have a better chance, and it helps all of us as women to know how what we could do differently or what our chances are so we know what we should be looking out for and just being more aware because if you don't know that it's really hard how do you know what's going to happen? How do you know what's going to be next?
Hmm. I'm wondering if you can help us walk through layers of awareness and different approaches depending on, different, well, let's call them bodies. At Courageous Being,
Mhm.
I sometimes talk about how in order for you to really be in a place of that, cool, calm inner peace and inner center in the face of anything that might be coming up, you really don't want to be marginalizing any aspect of your experience. They all have to work together.
Mhm.
Physical aspect, the emotional aspect, the mental aspect, and also the spiritual aspect. However you call it, whatever refer to it as, but your energetic being, your soulful being. So could we look at awareness in this context through these layers? So physically
Mhm.
speaking, what can women be doing
Yeah.
in promotion of, awareness? I mean, I can
Yeah.
think of a couple things, but
Yeah. I
tell
mean,
us.
and I'd love to hear your input of things you're thinking of, but like one of the big ones is, the self exams, right? The breast self exams that they tell you to do every single month. You have to know your own body. And when something changes, you have to be aware of that, right? And that's an opportunity for you to have that conversation with your doctor or say something doesn't seem right. And that's not only for breast cancer, that's for everything in your life, right? You should be aware of what's going on. And I think people say that, the doctors say sometimes, oh, it's just this, but you still don't feel right and you continue to push and continue to push and sometimes that does come out. So I think it really is that awareness of your own body. And as far as breast cancer, it's self exams, right? Is definitely the first step. Are there other things you were thinking of, Ivana?
Well, it's so cool because I wanted to connect that with like also giving yourself grace. I totally learned this from you because you have been offline and online educating us about mammograms too, right? So
Yes.
on the one hand, self exams, being really, comfortable with giving that time to
Yeah.
yourself to attune and listen. Am I picking up on something physically?
Yep.
At the same time, I think big piece of the physical awareness is I'm not going to be able to pick up on everything. There
Yep.
are tools and resources out there that can pick up stuff for me.
Absolutely.
So I am going to, so tell us about mammograms and what are the
Yeah.
recommendations these
Yeah.
days?
The recommendation is to have a mammogram starting at age 40. I think that's younger than it used to be. Definitely something you should talk to your doctor about. Maybe even earlier if you have a history in your family, right? Or your sister had it, or your mom had it, or something else. So that recommendation may be different. But I think on average, they say 40. And for some people, they say every year. Some people, they say every other year. Again, I think that depends on a few factors. Again, something to discuss with your doctor. I think by age 50, though, you do need to be having them annually. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you kind of what I read. But, I will tell you that a mammogram, I can't tell you that a mammogram saved my life, but I can tell you that a mammogram found my cancer and allowed me to start that treatment and figure that out. And I know next week's guest, I'm giving it away, Andrea Anita, hers was also found on a regular mammogram. So it tells us how important that is. And when I talk to women sometimes, and I sometimes get a little personal, or they're talking to me about something, or they're asking me a question about my breast cancer, I'll be like, hey, when's the last time you had a mammogram? I stood up in front of a room where I was giving a presentation last year during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and it was a room of women. And as I ended, I said, hey, I just want to remind you, I'm wearing pink today because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. If you have not had a mammogram in the last year, please go get one. It's something that, people have made to be this scary thing. It's uncomfortable. It's da, 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 but literally it could save your life. So, it's not that uncomfortable. It's something that I think is so important. And, if Andrea and I hadn't had them, would we be here today? Would we have had it a lot worse? I mean, there's so many things that you think about. So it's not to scare you, it's to just say, hey, it's one of the preventive things that we can do
Mhm.
when we talk about breast cancer.
Yeah. As you're saying this, I'm just thinking about how this piece where you said, well, it's not it our minds are making it out to be maybe more scary than it really is. So one thing you could do is you could talk to someone who's been through it and ask the questions that we don't think to ask, which are so like the tactical questions. So we don't need to go into that here right now, but just knowing that I could pick up the phone and ask you,
Yes.
okay, walk me through this experience because I'm really uncomfortable with it. Help me get cognitively, so from a mental body standpoint, like help me get aware about what
Mhm.
is it really that I'm scared of? What is it really? What would this be like? So there's a
Yeah.
lot I feel like we could do cognitively in support of just
Absolutely. And I think that I even just saw something about it the other day, and how I think, especially your first time you go and you've heard all these stories about how it's uncomfortable and how that's happening. But then you get done with it, and women have said, it's really not that bad. Like, it's not like completely invasive. And most of the time, the technicians, at least, that I've had, are very nice and will talk to you and explain the process, and make sure you're feeling comfortable there. But I think sometimes, and even though you've said this many times, sometimes we have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable, right? Having that uncomfort of having a mammogram gives us the peace of mind that we're good. So, especially if you have any doubt, and that's probably the biggest thing I could say, like, right. And I love that you always say that we have to get uncomfortable to be comfortable. And it's totally true. I,
yeah.
you know, I recently experienced where I went off a cancer drug called tamoxifen earlier this year. And I said to my doctor, I said, I want to go off this, I'm having other issues. And I know we're not going to get into that today, but I need to do a PET scan just to make sure in my mind that everything is good and I am clear. It's part of that comfort, right?
Hmm.
To have that. And I think we're going to talk about that too a little when we talk about fear and courage too
Yeah.
later this month.
This is a great example of working with all the bodies, right? So you're tuning into your body and saying, this is not working for me anymore, but I'm not going to just go on I'm not going to just go what I call it rogue here. I am
Yeah.
then going to bring this up with my medical team Then I'm going to receive information from them, back to listening. So it's like there's this like fine tuning and back and forthing that happens. It's not an all or nothing. I love this
Mhm.
example of physically I'm aware that this is no longer working for me. So then I'm bringing this up with my team, and then we're having a mental conversation about it. Then I'm listening to the feelings about it. What can we be doing to be more emotionally aware of everything
Yeah,
surrounding this big topic?
yeah. Emotionally, if you have breast cancer, it is a very kind of scary time. And I know we're going to talk more about that. But I think the things that we can do for each other, and I say this all the time, talking to others, right? Sharing our stories, sharing what our process was. And I've said it a bazillion times, everybody's journey is their own. So you have to know what your journey is. But just by talking with others or talking with somebody who knows had this or experienced it will help you, and will also help you know that, okay, she was okay. She came out well on the other end. That works really well. I also think there's other types of support, right, that we can do for each other, whether that's, bringing food, running errands, if something's going on. I think there's lots of ways we can support, give that unending love, right? And it's not really probably just the person undergoing the treatments. It may be their family members, right? It could be others that are part of their circle that need your support at that time too. So I think there's so many parts of support. Um, I think one last thing that I'll say has to do with the positivity, right? I think by sharing and talking with others, we understand that others who have had this are okay. They're now okay. Everything's good, right? They just need to continue that awareness. And by them having that positive attitude, by me having a positive attitude while I was undergoing treatment, as scary as it was, I think helps me come out better on the back end, right? And
Yeah.
having support and having friends and having people who checked in on me all add to that positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And also when the outcome is different, right?
Yep.
Continuing to be there for each other,
Yep.
even if the, numbers are not turning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And even if it's like it ends up being a journey that we would associate with, bad news and more bad
Right.
news or recurring, right? It's also possible to continue to show up for each other, support each other, love on
Yeah.
each other, and be there for each other in all the ways, right?
And I'm hoping by us having the awareness, which was the
Yeah.
reason we want to do this today, is that if something is going on, that you catch it a lot earlier so that you can treat it and you have every opportunity, because treatments are so much better than they were, even 10, 20, 30 years ago. This is something that is very treatable now, especially if you catch it early. And that's why that awareness, those mammograms, those other things are key.
Yeah. One last thing that we both, like to talk about that I think also belongs in this conversation is the importance of resting and the importance of investing in your in that proverbial, mask that you put on yourself, no matter where you are in this journey, right? You know that in the past, so before the diagnosis, it would have probably been a good idea for you to take a beat a little more often than you did, right? And
It would
invest in
have.
some self-care moments intentionally. And then, here's the diagnosis. Now you're working through that, you're experiencing it. Also important to be able to, give yourself some of the
Yep.
resting experiences that you could have done for yourself. And now that you're
Yeah,
in this
and I think
phase,
that's
right?
part of it too, right? Like stress and not giving yourself that time does not
Yeah.
help anything in your health. So I
Yeah.
think your point there is right on, giving ourselves that time for ourselves. I mean, it's so important, and I still am bad at it some days. So, you need to just make that time for yourself. So,
Yeah, because
yeah.
like you say, there's not a single cause. We know that from science, from research, It is a combination, and there are things that we don't have control over, but some of the lifestyle choices, they do add up. And so
Absolutely.
one of the things you could be, paying attention to is, really nourishing and taking good care of yourself on a
Absolutely.
regular basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah.
What a great conversation. I'm so glad we
Yeah.
could talk about this today, about awareness. I'm super excited for our other guests that we'll have during Breast Cancer Awareness Month because it is such an important topic to me personally and to a lot of other women out there. Whether you've experienced it or had a friend, I'm sure every one of us knows somebody who's undergone some form of breast
Absolutely.
cancer. So,
Yeah.
it's such an important thing, such an important
How would
topic.
you summarize it? How would you summarize it from the perspective of our angle, our lens,
Our pivot?
from the perspective of awareness and raising your own awareness around breast cancer and helping other people raise awareness? How is that for
Y-
you
Yeah,
personally?
and
Step forward.
and it's a great question because the pivot for me really, I think, more happened when I started talking about it.
Mm.
And the fact that I can help others, even with just my experience, to make them feel better, to make them understand it's not a death sentence. It is something that is very treatable that we can do. So I think my big pivot there happened when I started talking about it. And I love that I can talk about it in this format as well versus 101. So, if you are, and my best advice also is if you are now undergoing some sort of treatment or found out you have, reach out to somebody. Somebody else who's gone through it. And if you can't find anybody, there are plenty of us out there that may not know personally, but that would be happy to help you. So, I think that is really for me what made a difference.
Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you
Of
for
course.
lifting us up and being, inspiring and motivational as always. I really appreciate it and really deeply look forward to the rest of our series.
Me too. And remember, everybody, if you have a pivot, step into it. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Step Into the Pivot. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights from our conversation. Remember, life is a series of pivots, and it's in those moments of change that we truly grow.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, make sure to check out our websites. You'll find additional resources, behind-the-scenes content, and more details about our incredible guests. We love hearing from listeners, so reach out with your thoughts, questions, or your own pivot stories.
To keep the conversation going, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram, where we share updates, quotes, and engage with our amazing community.
If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback makes a difference, and it helps us bring you meaningful conversations. We're signing off, reminding you that every pivot is a step forward. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Step Into the Pivot.